never been, but I'll just let you
Yes.
They know their fit. They know the flexibility.
Yes.
They know their fit. They know
It doesn't feel
We kind of just wanted to open up the floor to everyone in the audience to start a dialogue about what you witnessed, questions you may have, or if you want to learn more about films. So anyone,
I don't want to overtalk, but I have a million things to say. I feel like the one in which there were plants planted in the mouths of the two girls who were laying down as if they're part of the soil, that as an image felt very much like a synthesis between human beings and land. And I know that this collection of films is about a very specific place, and I'm wondering if anybody can talk about that.
yeah, that was my film.
Okay, I loved it, by the way.
Thank you. It was a fair exchange performance. So we were using stinging nettles, which growing up in the Balkans is like what your parents used to beat you with and what other kids like used to torture each other with. And I was thinking about like women hurting each other and using the plant as a way to symbolize that, but then also have like a healing afterwards, so that there is this pain, but there's also such a connection between Balkan women that care about each other, but also have experienced so much hurt from each other through cultural traditions. Yeah. Anyone else?
I have a question. I don't know who made this film, but it was one about Yanni. Was that cinematographer?
That's Dora.
Okay. It seemed like this was a scratch on the surface of like the things that you found at the center. Do you feel like there's like another larger work about it? Because I feel like there's so much more. Like I'm sure you uncovered so much.
Thank you for the question. This film was one of the first films that I've ever made, and I was using my first experience, like you said, it really was kind of scratching the surface after having gone to the archives for the first time. And I'm in the process of developing that work, and I'm doing more archival research. I recently found out that I could get access to the secret police files kept on my grandfather. In the beginning of the film, my dad talks about how he was a chauffeur. He was actually the family chauffeur for Enver Hoxha as a young man. He was 18 or 19. So I'm really curious to see what's in those files, if anything. And it's a work in progress, definitely. This is just the first step that I was taking. I kind of cringe when I watch it now because I feel like I've grown so much since having made it, but yeah, this was the first step. I don't know where it's gonna take me, but it's continuing. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I have another one. This is for Alyssa. What was the significance of the garment was that your grandmother?
That was my
that she put on. Like, can you talk about that? And also just like I'm curious overall, what it was like. Did you go there knowing what shots you wanted to do, or was it kind of just like you followed your grandparents around and like they just did what they wanted to do?
So basically, the film is also part of something larger that I'm developing and still trying to figure out how exactly I'm going to tell the story. But basically, the house that I recorded, that was my grandparents' home in Albania, and basically we found out that it's going to get torn down in order to, in the efforts of modernizing the city, which has become a big issue in the capital specifically. So I wanted to create a physical piece of media and that's kind of why I wanted to shoot it on film too, so I can memorialize it in some type of way and kind of show the history of them living there. They built the house themselves, like by hand. My grandfather, my grandmother, and my uncle. So that's that film. And then the garment is the traditional costume from Tirana. So in Albania, each city or each village, each part of the country has their own particular costume that they wear. And that one was particularly from Tirana. And I really wanted to get that shot, my grandmother putting it on. And I remember even while I was filming her doing that, she was talking a lot about her youth, which I'm like, I wish I got all that footage recorded. Yeah.
Beautiful. Cool.
Yeah.
This was beautiful. Been waiting for it to come out. You guys all did an amazing job. I've been waiting. A question for Mirella actually, because I've been waiting for this to see it. What was the connection in like from Babu going from like a very open place and then showing like this very tight and where he worked, rather than like where like his old home versus his new home, like his living space?
Yeah, so mine was the returning leaving, and Isaac is my dad, and he's a sassy person as you saw then. But I think in my own upbringing, I witnessed his own kind of like mental decline over the years with his being in New York City, living, you know, hard labor, living a life of hard labor. And I wanted, you know, I thought a lot about the way that our families just function within ethnic enclaves and the way that ethnic niches function with mutual aid. That film was, I mean, that footage was in '97, shortly before the Kosovo outbreak. And when they had gone there, they thought, oh, it's safe again. It was so soon after the wars in general, but they were just tended to lean on the optimistic side. And so they had to leave again right away. And my dad always wanted to completely move back, and with every decade of his life, lost another decade of realizing that would never happen, because what it takes to land here, let alone support, you know, family back there, would never allow him to kind of make that move for himself. And so for me, the representation of like the exterior and the Plavlusinia landscape is kind of his dream state and where he is too at the end. But also, like, I think the footage from before also shows that it's not that idyllic either in a lot of ways. It was a very hard place for them to live, and that's also part of why they never fully returned.
This is a collective question. You already touched upon it a little bit, but what do you think, like, being Balkan, and how do you think it influences the storytelling and how you carried out each of your specific film projects?
I think it's incredibly heavy.
Yeah.
I feel like we all carry so much weight of generational trauma. Like, we're constantly living with the past and dealing with it in the present. And I feel like we all kind of have that in our work.
I think it's hard to differentiate exactly like what is like Balkan work from other immigrant work sometimes, or first gen work, because even Dxhesva, even the idea of the coffee, you know, is so transnational. And I feel like that's something we're defining as we go along. And since like we're all from different regions of like, you know, former Yugoslavia or the Balkans in general, we're finding overlaps that still exist in other places too. And it's just like this process of parsing that out.
Yeah, Dxhesva is the traditional coffee pot tool that we use across the Balkans and also the Middle East. And
yeah, just for context.
And sorry, but even to connect back to what you said earlier about the connection between the body and land, so much of like our mythology comes from like the mountains themselves, and so sometimes when we get into these discussions just as a group, it becomes so related to the land and just having had generations of people
who've been forced out of that.
yeah, and just like the identity has so much to do with like those mountains specifically, that like that life, and it feels almost just like an organic thing. Us
I don't know if you've heard, like, maybe there's stereotypes, but the people in the Balkans are really, like, nationalistic, patriotic, like, fighting over what the borders are. And so it's, like, an interesting, like, psychic space to inhabit, to then immigrate and not be part of this land that you have so many feelings about who it belongs to, and to then go through the process of, sort of like liberalization and democracy, neoliberal, like capital transformation. And I don't think it's specific to the Balkans, but I think it's been really significant for me to meet everyone and share our experiences, because you just like, you don't know what the truth is of what you hear, and so when others can reflect back to you like sentiment and story and myth and feeling, I think like I cried through multiple films, so yeah.
Yeah, Nicholas.
I had the opportunity of going to the Balkans in, I think it was 2011 to 2013, Zagreb, and I spent time in Mostar, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I was the first artist to go as part of a project back in 2013 that was called the Americanization of the Balkans and the Balkanization of the US. Mm-hmm. So, very problematic title. Just thinking about it in terms of where we are now, and how the story that I gathered there was that politicians told people that people who have lived together and laughed together and fought together over centuries, that all of a sudden they were different, and so much relate to what's happening here in the US, but really, I felt quite close to home there, and things can happen very slowly in the Balkans, at least in Bosnia, and very fast. Slow and fast is a different sense of time. So I'm thinking about your roles as, when I think about younger people, younger generations, I'm moving forward. Like somebody sent me forward, so I'm always moving, the younger generations are moving into the future. But you have chosen to go back. Maybe as a way of retrieving something and then bringing that forward. Can you speak to some of that? That idea of retrieving, going back, but not to stay there, to move that forward.
I mean, I could speak about it for me. For example, like I spent majority of my life in America, but my entire family continues to grieve the life they could have had back home, and a war brought them here. So I think being around that and hearing that constantly makes you desire that and want to know what's over there, what am I missing, what did I miss, what did I lose, what could have my life look like. And then, at least for me, like my family's scattered all over the world, but that's the one place where we can all be together again. So there's that feeling of wanting to feel that every single time. And like for me, I would say, and I think a lot of people who experience war or displacement, like you always want to go back home. You always want to go to the place you feel the safest, or where your identity, where you rely, where your traditions are, where your rituals are. Yeah, and I would say a lot of people from the Balkans feel that way. And I think even younger generations, we're reminded, because we care about our culture, we care about our language, we care about our traditions, and we really care about community. And I think it's just is a way for us to feel that every time. Yeah.
That's what I think it's a reimagining act because, and this goes for a lot of cultures, but so much of the burden of remembering tradition or remembering heritage falls on like women or like in that genderized way, and it has in like our families as well. And I feel like for myself, when I think about what I've been asked to bring forward, I don't accept it. And part of the retrieving process is actually reimagining what I am transmitting into the future because I am here and I will live here. And so it is a moment of rewriting, you know. But yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question about this retrieving. Is there something specifically important about showing specifically Albanian and Balkan heritage in New York right now? Like, is there like a, not only identity, but like a political, also something that you wanted, that reimagining is this like landscape, personal, but do you feel like the Balkans sometimes maybe is misunderstood? Like, is this a part, any part of your thinking in showing this in US and like the relationship between US and the Balkans? And like, what's the next step for this collective? I want to know. How can we follow you?
I think, well, one reason that I think it's important for us to have shown this work here in New York is there is one example is there's this island off the coast of Albania that during the communist period was an armory, so it had a lot of weapons, and I think they also like tested weapons there, and so it's super toxic, and the government hasn't done anything to clean it or like revitalize it, and they sold it. They sold that island to the Kushners.
Wow.
And the company specifically is also linked to the Gaza revitalization. So they are figuring out how to clean up a toxic area to make it luxury apartments and vacation homes. Also, for example, Elbit Systems, I don't know if you know that it's a weapons manufacturer based in the UK that is like being kicked out of the UK. They are likely finding a new home in the Balkans to build weapons. And so, you know, I think like, you know, we have lived there not manufacturing weapons for a long time. And there are people that have lived on this land, and the history is obviously like complicated. But I think that I think it's important to like understand a little bit about like the history of the region, given that, and also, yeah. Anyone else want to say anything about it?
Eric Adams.
I don't understand that meme. Someone explained to me the Eric Adams
that's crazy.
story.
I don't want to talk about it. Also, I just wanted to say, like, I think it's important for us to be showing work together, like, across borders, because in New York, especially, there's other Balkan art communities, but they're so nationalistic. It's very isolated, like Bosnians isolate themselves, Albanians isolate themselves, etc., etc. So for us to be able to share work across borders and mirror each other and understand each other is like something that doesn't exist right now, and we desperately need. And there's so many connections. We share all the same mountains. All our mythologies reflect each other in different iterations, and spiritually we're connected, and we need to exist and talk to each other about what we're dealing with and caring. And it's reflected in the way we spell Dxhesva too. It's a hybrid spelling of like a bunch of different languages.
and nobody knows how to pronounce it, but it's okay.
Yeah, and to Yelena's question, like that's the plan, basically. That's what the future of Dxhesva is, like creating a safe space across borders.
Yeah, and to continue public-facing work. Like, we just want to gather and bring people together and have conversations.
Yeah, going back to this thread of retrieval, I was very interested in that song, that folk song in the last piece.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was mine. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's like, I don't exactly know why these women are like mourning not having like men to marry, but it reflects like why marriage is so ingrained in Balkan women. Like, not being married is so looked down upon, and I think it was also like post-wartime, and women a lot of men have died, and being an unmarried young woman is just like incredibly disappointing for their life, because that's all that their existence depends on, is being attached to a man, and working and living for that man and family. So yeah.
I have a follow-up question about the song too. Just because you also made the film with the stinging nettles.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, and you made the first film too, also, right?
The little scratch.
Yeah.
Thing, yeah.
Cool. So they're all very, very different types of films, and also very different from the other film you showed here recently too. So like you have a very broad style, but the I was wondering, like, I did detect a certain similarity in like the some of the harmonies that you're hearing in that song, and the way that you use sound design in the Stinging Nettles film. Is there? Am I imagining that connection, or is there something like?
I mean, I wasn't thinking about it while making it. I just wanted to experiment with activating my voice and like looping it and see what world I end up in. But yeah, it is an interesting connection that I'm only making now.
Is it okay to make a commentary or like response?
Yeah, go for it.
Because like that song, because right before, did you not have that clip where it was like that interviewer asking that Bushnot girl, like, do you go out, like what do you guys do, and then after that I see the singing, and like for me, because I also remember hearing these songs like growing up in home videos, and, like whenever we put 2 months ago, and like in that connection after seeing that interview, kind of like in my mind I was thinking like, oh, like I also remember hearing like, when you get married you can do this, when you get married you can do this, when you get married you can do this. So maybe it could have been more like a sense of freedom, because it's been forbidden from their parents constantly, and you have that divorced woman who's like, it's just shame to be divorced, you know. So it's like not just like controlled by a man, but also freedom by the man too, like in a weird sense, like that has to be unlearned.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that. I love what you guys are doing, because I feel like it's so male focused in the Balkans, especially. Like, the woman's job is just to serve to them, and seeing this history, even if it's a sad history, it still shows what it's like to be a woman in the Balkans, and it feels good to see that, like what my grandma went through and all of them. So I love to see that too, giving women their voice, even if, you know, it's kind of sad to see. But
something that just came to mind was like in the last clip, all the women together, storytelling and creating community together and art together. It's just like reflecting of what you guys are doing here, and I think it's just like a beautiful manifestation in real time, continuing community and culture.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a quick question about like how you guys approach this as like young westernized Balkans. And as I feel like for all of us here that are Balkan, we always struggle with like this idea of like identity between like two places, like growing up here and whatever. So I was wondering like how you approach going back and making these movies with with like a sense of integrity or respect with like that's something our culture like values so highly, and by being represented in certain ways. I was just wondering, do you guys think about integrity, respect, and as like westernized kind of Balkans, like just assuming, how did you approach it with youthful and young kind of mindset, I guess?
I think that kind of came in the name of Other Daughters because there is the other, okay, within the family unit that we were all in, you know, or in general, as being first-gen kids, you're expected to live a certain life, provide for your parents' life, you know, and do all of those things. And so you have like the golden immigrant children, and then you have us, you know, like doing everything essentially that's wrong. But part of the irony is this, part of the irony of what we're doing is that we reject so much of our culture and that we are outliers because we don't subscribe to so much of the expectations laid upon us. And yet we invest so much of our time looking at it, discussing it, thinking about it. And I think that's where the respect or integrity comes in, because our hearts are there, you know, our intention with engaging with it is clear in that way. And I think even, you know, we all have different relationships with our parents who actually do experience a lot of shame around our work, around our community of other parents knowing about the kind of work that we're doing. And yet, as time goes on, they're finding a way to also appreciate it as this other third space. They're starting to understand that it is doing something with our tradition that they do feel seen and appreciated in. So that's the best way.
So what would your advice be to, I guess, us or anyone that's interested in being part of that other third world or whatever?
Yeah. I would say accept that you are in that other, understand that is like how you're functioning, and just believe that eventually they're going to be like, okay. But it's always hard for the first 5, 10, 15 years. I mean, you know, Anissa said all our bodies really have been a site of psychological warfare. We've talked about this throughout, 11 years old to 24 to 30 to 34, right? So you accept that burden, you accept that fight, and you just move through it, because what's the other option? You don't want that other life, you don't believe in it. That's going to break you, I think, more down the line. So I think follow your heart as well.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about reclamation, reclaiming your identity, whatever that means to you, and picking apart the traditions and how it's affected you, and putting it out there in a different lens for people to absorb. Yeah. I don't know. Any more questions before we close? Or comments?
I have one last follow-up on that. So would you guys accept the title of being reformers? Like Reformation?
Yeah. The reformers.
Partially, I would say partially. In some ways, yeah.
Maybe that'll be the next title of the screening.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to have a meeting about it.
Yeah.
Balkan reformers.
Thank you all so much for coming.